All right, so the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. Federal aid is given to schools with low-income students. The program expanded Head Start while providing affordable food for children. All right, after Congress passed the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 65, schools significantly increased their focus on the issue of what? Healthy and affordable food choices, okay? If the government helps pay for your food, as you know, you will eat what they say you eat, okay? And they're going to try to pick something healthy, even though they don't always accomplish that. Okay, as part of the President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society legislation, what impact did the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 65 have on public education? Federal funding for education was eliminated. I don't think so, okay? Higher education became more exclusive, so they started kicking more people out of high school. The Head Start program was created. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Sounds like it matches the notes, right? Okay, so because of this, Head Start expanded and was created. All right, the Voting Rights Act of 65, okay? So Attorney General can investigate the voting discrimination that's happening in the South. No more poll taxes, no more literacy tests. This stuff is going away, okay? Which in turn resulted in a sharp increase in African American voter registration. All right, y'all, we're gonna have civil rights acts. We're gonna have voting rights acts. We're gonna have a bunch of them. You don't have to memorize them. Here's what you have to remember. There's a trick to it. All right, if it's a voting rights act, it's probably going to get black people and women better rights to vote. If it's a civil rights act, it's going to stop segregation. It's going to stop racism. So it's pretty simple, okay? All right, the civil rights legislation signed into law in 65 had which effect? Here you go, more black people registered to vote because they stopped the discrimination, okay? All right, next one, the 24th Amendment outlaws poll taxes in America. You can no longer charge to vote. This is one of the main arguments today for people saying, I hear a lot of people saying this, you have to have a license to vote, right? And the Democrats are saying, well, no, that's discriminating. That's like paying a poll tax. You are charging people in order to vote because you have to pay for the ID. Well, there's a simple solution. We can have IDs for everybody. Just let the government pay for it. I'm sure the Republicans I'm sure the Republicans wouldn't mind paying $20 per American to get them a government issued ID, if it would mean that our elections from now on would not be fraudulent, okay? So, the Civil Rights Act of 68 bans discrimination in housing. So you remember the Civil Rights Act of 64, well this one applies the same principle, but to housing, okay? Religion, race, gender, okay? You cannot deny somebody the right to rent or buy a house because of those things. Following the March on Washington, which is where Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech, the civil rights movement became much more violent, unfortunately. The civil rights movement had two branches. One was very peaceful, that was Dr. King's movement. That was the one that was gaining traction and getting a lot of white people in. The other side was the black nationalist groups. These are people that thought that black people were the best race on the planet. And if you really look at them, okay, black nationalism is really no different. It's the exact opposite as white nationalism. Okay, so some people would say that, you know, Black Lives Matter is a member of this black nationalist group, and they are. Okay, they are black nationalists. So, anyway, moving on. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the head of that was a guy named Stokely Carmichael. He believed that the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, this is Dr. King's group, was being too cautious. Carmichael called for black power. This is the man that actually invented the phrase black power, okay? And the symbol is a clenched fist like this. You will see many Black Lives Matter people doing this. So this right here is something common. You've probably seen it before. It's a hair pick, okay? Many of my students have these. Many of my students who have these don't know what it really means and the history behind it. Basically, it is a symbol saying that black people are the best race, okay? That's what it's about. So, Malcolm X Okay? Malcolm X is a minister for the Nation of Islam. Malcolm X started off life as a man named Malcolm Little. Okay? He's half white, I think, if I'm not mistaken. He actually had red hair. And he was a criminal up until his early 20s. He went to prison for burglary. Okay? He had broken into some houses. And while there, he runs across some people that are black nationalists, and they're also Islamic. They call themselves the Nation of Islam. Okay, and he becomes a convert. He converts over to the Nation of Islam, and then before he leaves prison, he is a full-blown preacher in the Nation of Islam, and he becomes a very powerful man. So Malcolm X, a minister of the black Muslims, called for blacks to reject the white world and create a separate black society. He said all the problems of black people were to be blamed on the white devils. It sounds familiar. Same stuff is happening now. Okay, but something that's different than now is that he says that black people should separate themselves. They should voluntarily segregate themselves into their own community and not have anything to do with whites. That was Malcolm X's goal. Another black nationalist party, okay, or group, is the Black Panthers. You've probably heard of them before. They usually have a type of uniform. They dress all in black, and they have a panther symbol. Now, unlike the Nation of Islam, the Black Panthers actually became a political party, and they were running for office. And the Black Panthers, what they did is they took care of their neighborhood. Okay, they wanted a segregated neighborhood, no whites allowed, that kind of thing. And they also said that they would take care of their own people, and they didn't want any white cops interfering in their society. So whenever somebody got shot or something like that in their community, they would actually go find the person and kill them themselves. They were the police of their neighborhoods, and there were many, many shootouts between the Black Panthers and the police whenever they were trying to carry out vigilante justice. Now, they opened up daycares in their community in Oakland, California, which is where it all started. And these daycares would provide not only child care, but also free food to the community and things like that. Well, how did they pay for it? They had a little secret. The Black Panthers, many of them, were drug dealers. However, they did have a pretty good code. They would only sell drugs in the white community because they did not want it to destroy the black community. So they dealt in drugs, they took white people's money while destroying their future, and they used the money to promote the black community. Okay? Let's see, between 1964 and 1968, the U.S. experienced 150 major urban riots. Public opinion that had been won during the nonviolent protests was lost. Because the civil rights movement turned violent, white people started just getting away from it. They just started saying, you know what, this is not the way to go. We're not going to burn down our own cities, which, man, that sounds familiar again, doesn't it? History is repeating itself, folks. Okay? Race relations were doing pretty well until George Floyd died. And then everything went crazy. Okay? So anyway, Dr. King went to Stokely Carmichael, went to Malcolm X, and went to the Black Panthers and said, you guys are doing it wrong. You're making it harder for us to actually make any ground. You're making the white people mad instead of making them actually brothers and sisters. You're alienating, and this is the wrong way to do it. Dr. King went to Memphis, Tennessee. He went there to help a group of striking garbage truck workers. They were mostly black. And he went to his hotel with his friends, Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, and they were taking showers and they were getting ready, getting everything ready to go. And Dr. King got ready first, and he stepped out on the balcony. And at that moment, a young Southerner named James Earl Ray, who was stationed across the way, the breezeway here, took a shot and killed Dr. King. This is Dr. King's body right here. You can see his head, okay? It's been covered up by his friends. This is Al Sharpton. This is Al Sharpton. This is Jesse Jackson right here, okay? So these two guys are actually still around. They're still pretty famous in the civil rights movement. Jesse Jackson would be the first black man to ever run for president in the 1980s with his Rainbow Coalition, as he called it. He was going to take all minorities and make one big coalition together to elect him president. Al Sharpton, he's one of these guys where every time something that looks racist happens, he goes and he stirs up trouble. Okay? And he does it for money. He does not do it to help people. He has a fee. He goes to the black churches and gets them to collect an offering to pay him to show up and talk. Okay, that's what he's been doing for the last 40 or 50 years. So, all right, here we go. Which individual opposed civil disobedience as the primary method for advancing civil rights? Okay, so who was the violent one out of all this? Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, or Mohandas Gandhi? Well, Malcolm X. Okay, Malcolm X is the one that wanted total segregation and violence towards whites. Okay, which historical conflict involved issues that were most similar to the issues raised by Martin Luther King Jr. during the 60s? Revolutionary War, World War II, Vietnam, Civil War. Which one's about race? Well, one of the things that we fought the Civil War for was race. Just one. There were about 10 other things that, unfortunately, I didn't get to teach you that in this class because we start this class right after the Civil War. But it is the most about the Civil Rights Movement, okay? All right.